All right, so here we go with our first video of the 2019-2020 school year. So as we get started into statistics, one of the things that you'll find is there is a lot of writing and a lot of reading that you guys are going to have to do, and hopefully you guys got a little bit of a taste of that on Friday, and you took the time to actually fill in these notes for all these vocabulary terms, and a lot of this chapter is just new vocabulary stuff about designing samples, designing studies and surveys and experiments and those kinds of things. So if you did not take the time Friday or this weekend to fill out all these vocabulary terms, I'm going to scroll through this. You may need to pause the video and fill these in as I scroll through these, but hopefully you took the time to fill all this out and are ready to go, and we're going to jump into some examples here in just a minute. So here are the first couple of vocabulary terms, and I'm going to scroll down here in just a minute. Again, if you need to pause and fill these out, you can. Otherwise, continue on to the examples. So scrolling here to the next set of vocabulary terms. And scrolling again. And now we're going to jump into these examples. So getting ready here with day 2 examples. We're going to go through several of these examples together. These are in your notes packet. We're going to go through them, talk about all the vocabulary things that are involved with this, and hopefully that fill in these ideas. It's still probably not going to be enough. You're going to need to go study and read about these things on your own to really get a well-rounded understanding of all the vocabulary in this chapter. So let's take a look here. Example 1. What are some barriers to doing a census? Well, if you recall from the vocabulary, a census is gathering data from every single individual in a population. Now, the United States does a census every 10 years, and when they do a census of the United States every 10 years, it takes them about 6 years to gather all the data and finally put their reports out. And it employs hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people across the country and costs millions, if not billions of dollars to do a census. So global scale, big picture scale, the United States, the biggest barriers to doing the census is how long it takes and how much money it takes to do that. If you think a little bit smaller scale, we're going to use Olathe Northwest as our population for a lot of examples. So think about trying to gather information from every single student at Olathe Northwest High School. You go around, you're going to ask every kid, how many pets do they own? If you're going to get every single student, you have to have a master list of every single student. You have to go find them. There's going to be days where some kids are gone and some kids are here, and some kids are on homebound, and some kids are suspended, and some kids are in ISS, and some kids just don't show up for first and second hour, and they only come for third and fourth hour. And so it's going to take you a lot of time and money to be able to get all that information. So the barriers to doing a census are time and money. Time and money. Okay, example B with this. What 2 types of methods above are bad methods of sampling? So if you haven't already guessed this, convenience sampling is bad, and voluntary response. Convenience sampling is bad because you're not getting a representation group. You're just getting whatever's close to you at that particular time, and you're not going to be representative of the population with that. Voluntary response sampling is bad because many times people who respond voluntarily to surveys are those that have a strong opinion one way or another, and you're not getting the true feelings of the entire population. You're just getting the true feelings of those that feel strongly about that survey or about that question. So voluntary response is bad because you're not representing the population either. Okay, looking at example 2 here. Now, once we have this set up and we have done some good sampling methods, it's important for you guys to be able to identify the sample and the population, and which one is which. And you think, okay, this is really simple now. I promise you, when we get down into chapter 9 and 10 later on, knowing what the sample is, knowing what the population is, being able to distinguish between the two is much, much more difficult. So don't take these questions lightly. Make sure you actually understand why the sample is the sample, why the population is the population. So a high school student newspaper plans to survey local businessmen about the importance of students as customers. From an alphabetical list of all local businesses, the newspaper staff chooses 150 businesses at random. Of those, 73 return the questionnaire. So in this case, the population, who are we trying to gather information about? So the population is all local businesses. Okay. Newspaper plans to survey all local businesses. That is my population. Then what is my sample? And the sample, if you refer back to the vocabulary up above, the sample is the actual people or individuals that we gathered data from. Now this one tries to trick you because they give you two numbers here. So go back to who did we actually gather data from? Who did we actually gather the data from? We gathered the data from the 73 businesses that returned the questionnaire. The 73 businesses that returned that questionnaire. Why? Well, there was another 77 businesses that we didn't get any data from. So they are part of the sample? Nope, they're not part of my sample. My sample has to be the people that I actually gathered data from, so they had to actually return it. What do those other 77 represent? They represent non-response bias. So that could be a problem in this study because there is such a high percentage or a high number of people that are businesses that chose not to respond. So those 77 are non-response bias. Example B here, an archaeological dig turns up a large number of pottery parts, broken stone, tools, and other artifacts. Students working on the project classify each artifact and assign it a number. The counts in different categories are important for understanding the site. So the project director chooses 2% of the artifacts at random and checks his students' work. Okay, so what is my population? The population is all the artifacts. That are gathered at the dig site. Every single one of them is part of the population. My sample then is the 2% where they actually checked the student work. So the 2% that were checked are part of my sample. Okay, good. Again, they seem really simple, and they are pretty simple right now, but eventually they get more complicated. Really focus on population is everybody that you're trying to gather information about. The sample is who you actually gather data from. So population is about, sample is from. All right. A couple more examples here real quick, and then we'll let you get started on some practice. Now we're trying to identify what type of sampling method was used. Convenience versus voluntary versus SRS versus whatever. And so we're going to read these and try to figure this out. A teacher at a small university wanted to know the number of hours of sleep students were getting at night. To determine this, a teacher stood at the entrance of the library on the campus and asked the first 100 students who walked into the library, how many hours of sleep do you get at night? So is this convenience or is this voluntary? Well, in this case, because they're standing at the entrance to the library and they're asking the first 100 students, this is convenience. Now, why is this bad? Important question. Why would this be a bad, or how could this cause bias? Well, the first 100 students who walk into the library in the morning probably are ones that got up early. They're getting up and getting around, so they may not get as much sleep, or maybe they went to bed earlier and they got more sleep. I don't know, but could it easily systematically over or under represent the true number of hours of sleep the students are getting? In some way it could, either too much sleep or too little sleep. So yeah, it could cause some sort of bias in our data because it over or underestimates the true number of hours of sleep. Since it is just the first 100 students, it's not representing all of the students on campus. Example B, American Idol is a television show that uses public vote to determine who stays on the show. One of the judges wanted to determine which contestant the viewers preferred before the season final. To do this, he set up an online poll asking viewers to vote for which contestant they preferred. So convenience versus voluntary. In this case, it is a voluntary response. Sorry about the handwriting. We're still getting used to these Surface Pros and writing on them, so it's a little bit sloppy still at first. Okay, and how can this one be bad? Who's gonna call in and actually vote for this? Only those people that feel strongly about a contestant, probably the contestant's family members and friends. They probably got online like many of your parents have done when different things are going on and say, hey, go vote for this. So voluntary response samples are, again, going to be biased because they're going to overrepresent one particular person or underrepresent another person because they don't have as many family members or friends that call in or whatever. So easily over or underestimating the true opinion on the particular contestants on American Idol there. So voluntary response samples are bad. They cause bias as well. All right, we're done with video for day one. You guys are going to go now practice with this a little bit, and using that vocab, you're going to dig in and get a little bit of practice. We'll have a quiz later.